Let me paint you a picture. Words like awful, disaster, sabre, even abomination, they all orbit one grim idea. Something truly terrible. And in over a century of NHL history, we've seen more than a few teams earn that label. Today, we're not just talking about bad. We're diving headfirst into historically awful. So buckle up, boys. Let's take a ride back to 1975, where we'll meet the team that redefined rock bottom, the 75 Washington Capitals, the worst NHL team of all time. We all know the NHL season is no walk in the park. It's an 82-game marathon, a grind where even the best teams take their lumps. L's pile up, slumps happen, and for every cup contender, there's a stretch where things just don't click. That's hockey. But if you think modern struggles are tough, let's rewind to the days where the league began stretching beyond its original 6. Expansions meant new cities, new fan bases, and entirely new teams thrown together from scraps. And let me tell you, some of those early expansion teams were downright dreadful. Take the 1993 Ottawa Senators. That team won just 10 games all season. 10. And they weren't alone. The San Jose Sharks too spent their early years floundering at the bottom of the standings, having their own infamous 11-win season in 1993. Now, let's go back even further. June 8th, 1972. The NHL announces it's bringing in a franchise to the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., set to hit the ice for the 1975 season. On paper, it made perfect sense. D.C. had the Bullets on the hardwood, who'd later become the Wizards, the Redskins on the gridiron, and a city full of sports-hungry fans. Everything started off on a pretty promising note for the brand new Washington Capitals franchise. The man behind it all, Abe Paulin, the same visionary who helped bring professional basketball to DC, was now taking a crack at hockey. And in those early days, he seemed to be doing everything by the book. One of his first moves? Bringing in hockey royalty. Former Boston Bruins captain and Hall of Famer Milt Schmidt was hired to manage the team. Now, Schmidt wasn't just a familiar name, he was a proven winner. As general manager in Boston, he had already overseen 2 Stanley Cup victories in the early 70s. A pretty solid choice to help get things rolling. Then came June 12, 1974. That's when the Capitals, alongside fellow newcomer, the Kansas City Scouts, took part in the NHL expansion draft. Now, I'm sure most of you know what an expansion draft is and how it works, but just in case, here's a quick rundown. In an NHL expansion draft, each new team gets to select one player from each existing franchise. Of course, the established teams are allowed to protect a certain number of their players, making sure their stars and top prospects don't go anywhere. What's left is essentially a pool of unprotected players, veterans, depth guys, or prospects who haven't quite found their footing yet. The expansion teams also get a short exclusive window to sign any pending free agents who haven't been left unprotected yet. It's a tough puzzle to solve, especially when you're building a roster from scratch. For the Capitals, let's just say the selection didn't offer a ton of star power. Washington walked away with names like Leafs forward Dennis Dupere, Penguins defenseman Yvonne Lab, and Leafs goaltender Ron Lowe. Not exactly household names, but they would be some of Washington's better players. They also had the first overall pick in the amateur draft, and with it they selected defenseman Greg Jolly, a player who many hoped would become the cornerstone of the franchise. But hope can only take you so far. See, the hockey landscape at the time was a bit chaotic. The NHL had 16 teams, and the rival World Hockey Association boasted another 14. That's 30 teams fighting over a limited talent pool, most of it concentrated in North America. The result? Slim pickings, especially for expansion teams trying to build something from the ground up. It's not like today's expansion drafts where you see teams like Vegas or Seattle walk in and put together competitive rosters overnight. Back then, the talent just wasn't as deep and the options were severely limited. By the time the 1975 season rolled around, and with 2 more teams set to join the league, it became painfully clear. The Capitals were going to have a tough road ahead. There simply weren't enough NHL caliber players to go around. To the team's credit, the front office had made a few respectable moves, signing seasoned free agents like Tommy Williams and Doug Mowens. It was a start, solid names, steady hands, but the truth was hard to ignore. This team still didn't have the kind of talent you'd expect at the NHL level. Not even close. So they had to make a choice, and it wasn't an easy one. Out of necessity, they fast-tracked their recent draft picks, pushing them into the lineup well before they were ready for the big leagues. These kids, barely out of junior hockey, were suddenly staring down some of the best players in the world. To fill out the rest of their roster, they leaned on journeymen, aging veterans, and a handful of players with little to no NHL experience at all. It wasn't ideal, but it was a team.
The number one thing you're optimistic about in terms of the Ottawa Senators? We're a team.
At the very least, it was something to put on the ice, and that's where the story begins. So, October 9th, 1974 rolls around. The birth of a new era in hockey. The New York Rangers and the brand new Washington Capitals. Under the bright lights of MSG, it was opening night. The stage was set for a movie-like season. And things were underway. Sure, the Rangers took control and skated off with a 6-3 win, but hey, it was just the first game of the season. The Caps, for all their inexperience, had a few glimmers of hope. Jim Hrysiuk edged his name into the history books, scoring the first goal in franchise history. And young Greg Jolly, the first overall pick, notched his first assist and point on the team's second goal. So yes, there were reasons to believe, but what no one in that arena could have possibly known was just how rough the road ahead would be. Just 1 week after taking the ice for the very first time, the Washington Capitals edged their names into the win column. It was October 17th, and they edged out the Chicago Blackhawks in a 4-3 victory. So the boys were feeling good. A historic moment, their very first win in franchise history. But as sweet as that moment was, it didn't last long. Because what came next? A brutal stretch. 10 straight losses. Then came a tie, a tiny glimmer of hope, only to be snuffed out by 3 more defeats. It wasn't until November 19th, over a month later, that the Washington Capitals tasted victory again. This time it was against the California Golden Seals. Now, it doesn't take rocket appliances to understand this, but that's 14 games without a single win. After they ended this losing streak against the Seals, the Capitals were so thrilled to finally taste victory again, they actually pulled a garbage can out of the locker room and paraded it around the ice as if it were the Stanley Cup, symbolizing the garbage season that still lay ahead. They followed this win up by immediately going streaking again.
We're going streaking!
They followed what would ultimately be their only road win of the season with a brutal stretch once again. 11 straight games without a victory, 0-9-2, until, at long last, their third win came on December 15th. The opponent, the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Caps limped through the rest of 1974, closing out the year on a 6-game losing streak. The team was battered, the scoreboard unforgiving, and the new fan base was done. The season couldn't end fast enough. As the calendar flipped to 1975, Washington entered the new year with a record of 3-30-4. Head coach Jimmy Anderson summed it up in painfully honest fashion. "I'd rather find out my old lady was cheating on me," he said. "At least I could tell her to cut it out." It was a line soaked in frustration and bourbon, but if Coach Anderson thought the worst was behind him, he was in for a rude awakening. The second half of the season loomed large, and the Capitals were simply trying to survive. So imagine this for just 1 second. You're sitting on the couch with your buddy, controllers in hand, you're firing up Be a GM mode in shell. The goal isn't to win, but to lose. Gloriously. You're trying to tank a team so hard it goes 0-82, just to see if it's even possible. Now picture that but in real life. That's what this felt like. Not a pro hockey team chasing a cup, but a full-blown simulation gone wrong. A season spiraling, almost intentionally, like someone behind the scenes was testing just how bad it could get. As the season wore on, things for the Capitals took a sharp left turn into full-blown Looney Tunes territory. Over the entire season, they averaged just 1 win per month. Not once did they manage back-to-back victories. Not once. Mid-February, from the 11th to the 16th, was the only time they won 2 games in the same week. But any momentum they might have built came crashing down just 2 days later. The Capitals would go on a historic slide, losing 17 straight games from February 18th to March 26th. A stretch that still stands as the longest losing streak in NHL history. Things got so bad, the organization just started going through coaches like spare sticks. First, there was Jimmy Anderson, the same guy who had been there since day one. He was replaced by Red Sullivan, and when Sullivan couldn't stop the bleeding, general manager Milt Schmidt himself had to step in behind the bench. And finally, on April 6th, 1975, the merciful end arrived. The season, which must have felt as long as an MLB season with all of that losing, was finally over. The Capitals ended their nightmare on a bit of a high note, putting up an 8-4 win over the Pittsburgh Penguins. When the season finally ended, the Washington Capitals crawled across the finish line with a record of 8 wins, 67 losses, and 5 ties. That mark became the worst record ever posted in a season, a dubious honor nearly as untouchable as Wayne Gretzky's all-time points record. They broke the previous record for the fewest wins in a season, surpassing the 1973 New York Islanders, who at least managed to scrape together 12 victories. The 1975 Washington Capitals redefined what rock bottom looked like in professional hockey. The Capitals finished their inaugural season with just 21 points. And to make matters worse, or perhaps more embarrassing, the only team even remotely close to that low bar was the Kansas City Scouts, the other expansion team that joined the league that year. But even they managed to scrape together 15 wins and doubled Washington's point total. That's how bleak it was. The performance of both teams was so poor, so historically dreadful, that whispers started floating through the NHL boardrooms. Had we made a mistake? The league had taken a gamble on expanding, and these returns were brutal. Sending these teams to Cuba didn't seem like a bad option. And yet, remarkably, Washington was never moved. Washington stuck it out, weathered the storm, and over time, built itself up into a proud, successful franchise. Kansas City, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. They were relocated to Colorado in 1976. Then in 1982, they were relocated to a place far worse than Cuba, New Jersey. During the 1975 season, Washington lost 7 or more games in a row, not once, not twice, but on 5 separate occasions. On the road, they went 139-0, setting an NHL record with 37 consecutive road losses. Their home performance wasn't much better, ending the season at 7-28-5 at home. These numbers were brutal. A goal differential of -265. They scored just 181 goals while allowing a jaw-dropping 446. Both records for the worst kind of reasons. It was carnage on the ice. Among the few bright spots, Tommy Williams, a legitimate NHL caliber forward, led the team with 23 goals and 58 points in 73 games. On defense, Yvonne Lab quietly held down the blue line, contributing 27 points over 76 games and earning the respect of teammates and fans alike. Then there was Ron Lowe, the goaltender claimed from Toronto in the expansion draft. He finished 8-36-2 with a 5.45 goals against average, and somehow, against all odds, he recorded a shutout. He was the only goaltender to win a game for Washington that season. Neither John Adams nor Michael Bellhammer managed a single victory between them in a combined 43 games. The Capitals were forced to ice a roster so thin that 3 of their top 4 draft picks played 30 or more games. Top pick Greg Jolly managed just 8 points in 44 appearances, while poor defenseman Bill Mickelson posted an almost unfathomable -82 rating. So where do you go from here as a team? Well, when you've hit rock bottom, there's only one direction left: up. Well, the Capitals would remain near the basement for most of the following decade, occasionally flirting with playoff contention. They never again matched the historic lows of 1975. The real turnaround came in the mid to late 80s, when Max McNabb and Dave Poile reshaped the franchise through savvy drafting and bold trades. Suddenly, Washington had talent, real talent. Names like Mike Gardner, Bobby Carpenter, Rob Langway, Scott Stevens, Dale Hunter, Peter Bondra, and eventually Adam Oates. The team went from the laughingstock of the league to a playoff staple, reaching the postseason 14 straight years from 1983 to 1996. In 1998, they made it all the way to the Stanley Cup final, only to be swept by the powerhouse Detroit Red Wings. Then came May 12, 1999. Abe Pollin, the man who brought the Capitals to DC and stuck with them through thick and thin, sold the team to Ted Leonsis. There were growing pains, sure, but under Leonsis, the Capitals became one of the league's most consistent franchises of the new century. And in 2018, the impossible became real. The Washington Capitals won their first Stanley Cup, fittingly against an expansion team, the Vegas Golden Knights. Today, the Capitals are a proud franchise, a respected one. And if you told someone in 1975 that Washington would one day lift the cup, they'd probably laugh you out of the rink. Hey, that's the thing about sports. Even the worst beginnings can lead to something unforgettable. The 1975 Capitals may be remembered for all the wrong reasons. They're remembered nonetheless. A team so bad, so historically dreadful, that they earned a legacy all on their own. And that, my friends, is by far the worst team in NHL history. Thanks for sticking around till the end, boys. I really hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed making it. It's honestly inspiring to see how a team can go from being so dog shit to a respectable franchise just like the Caps did. Maybe there's hope for Buffalo after all. As always, if there's a player or story you want to hear me talk about from the hockey world, comment down below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to help this video reach more people. And I'll see you boys in the next one.